Welcome to week 3 of storytelling. This week we're going to be talking about brand identifiers and how you combine identifiers to create your brand style guide for your brand. A brand style guide is a set of standards for writing and design of brand communication for a specific brand. Guidelines are defined for voice, color, and font, as well as archetype, brand statement, logo, and other graphics or imagery. So let's talk a little bit about what exactly goes into brand identifiers. Brand identifiers are the visual and other message elements that help us recognize a brand in the marketplace and also that support the brand identity and the brand story. These kinds of things like color and logo and archetype all help us get a clear understanding of what the brand entails. Many times those visual brand identifiers are combined to create what we call a logo. For some people, logo is the brand. If you look at this slide of the brand identifiers, all of these are recognizable brands. But the logo is not the brand. So what's the difference? A brand is the perceived emotional corporate image as a whole. The identity of that, the visual aspects that form part of the overall brand. That's the identity of the brand, but that's just the visual aspects. The logo then identifies the business in its simplest form by using a mark or an icon. So that way when we look at the swoosh, we know it's Nike. But there's more to Nike than just the swoosh logo. There's a whole emotional resonance that Nike has as a brand that makes us connect to everything that Nike does. Shoes, apparel, sponsorships, it's all about being consistent with the emotional corporate image as a whole. But let's think about logos. So when we see these logos, they're immediately recognizable. For us, Starbucks, AT&T, and BP are brands that have very distinct corporate logos. But why is Starbucks that logo? Why is AT&T that logo? Why is BP that logo? There are reasons behind the choices that NASA, Apple, and Target make to come up with their logos. But once they've made those choices, they try to remain consistent so they have some kind of recognizable icon that people will understand. In all of these cases, these logos do have a connection to the archetype of the company. For instance, Starbucks' logo is reminiscent of a nautical theme because they're the explorer archetype. Their corporate history is based in unique roasts of coffee. So it's consistent for them to have a logo that harkens to the nautical. Many minor league baseball teams have interesting logos. Take the South Georgia Peanuts, for instance. It's fun, but it has a lot going on. What's the identity? The mood seems to be a playful mood, so perhaps they're the jester archetype. But would this logo look good if it were blown up or shrunk down? What would it look like in black and white? All these questions are things to consider when you're trying to develop a logo because the logo has to remain consistent across platforms, including platforms like t-shirts. Consider the Grizzlies logo. Is it good or bad? What's the mood? Does that grizzly bear look intimidating? What about the paw holding the basketball? Does that show some kind of action? Again, these are all things to consider.
It's the pop from the pizza place. It looks like a person. He matches the color of the restaurant. That is the coffee logo. That is a parade outfit. That is the Disney. Those are little worms. That looks like an M. But upside down, M's are W's. That is the Apple Store logo, and it has a bite of an apple in it. Ooh, looks like the American flag. A bell. Outside space. Looks like a shooting star with a planet. An eye. Chili, and it has an S next to it. And chilies are spicy. That looks like a beach ball. Beach balls are very colorful. The GE logo, that's where my grandpa works. Babies are little. Yes. That is a cheetah. A cheetah. A cheetah. A letter O. But it has a dot in it. An M from McDonald's, and it looks like a fry, but it's an M made out of fries. On a car, it's a pizza. A turkey that's very colorful, like the rainbow. The Nikes, that is coffee again. Maybe on a restaurant, that looks like a marble. That is on a control that you use to control the TV at Ryan's house. Panda bears live out in the woods, I think. Baby toys. Those look like baby toys.
Talked about logos, but let's move on to other brand identifiers like color and font. Color plays an important role in our recognition of specific brands. The color palette selection reflects brand personality based on the perception of the audience in the marketplace and is an important part of brand identity. Color also reflects the brand story as well as the customer relationship with the brand if it is done in a purposeful way. The reason this works is that color connects with human beings on a psychological level. We associate specific feelings, thoughts, and experiences with specific colors, much as we associate specific behaviors and characteristics with specific archetypes. So let's look at a little bit, and this is part of some of the readings that you had for this week about how psychology of color affects the way it's used in marketing. Look at the difference in color preferences that people of different genders have, the way those colors are used in products. Colors connect us to feelings, objects, to events, places, people, and brands. Different colors can help link our brands to different emotions, the same way archetypes help link brands to emotions. Because colors interact with our brains in a highly intuitive manner.
We sometimes think about the way color impacts our mood when we're deciding what to wear or what color to paint our walls, but it's not too often that we think about how color impacts our buying behavior, what we decide to purchase or not. But in fact, it's something that we should be absolutely aware of as consumers because according to some research, up to 90% of all product assessments have to do with color. In fact, some research says this is the very reason why you purchase a specific color or product. As Neil explains, quote, color is 85% of the reason you purchased a specific product. And there's additional research that sort of corroborates this as well. So, and says it's very pervasive and incredibly impactful. In fact, it only takes about 90 seconds for a customer to form an opinion about a product, and that takes into account what color it is. Does this surprise you at all, Mark?
No, it makes perfect sense. I know I do that myself. For instance, like if you're shopping for a car, you look at, you want a yellow car? No, because you feel like you're driving a taxi cab, you know?
Yeah. So yeah, they estimate that anywhere between 62 to 90% of the interaction you have with products you might potentially purchase has to do with the color. And this is something that obviously, like when we're going through websites and checking out, we should think about it. We should think, am I making the best possible choice, or am I being influenced by different factors? Because some colors have very specific effects. For example, yellow and orange are much more likely to cause you to buy something in the buy now buttons. That I found interesting. So it tends to produce this feeling of haste. And if you look at some websites, you'll see that their buy now buttons or register here are in these very bright colors like yellow and orange. Additionally, other colors have impacts that make us want to trust the company more. So Facebook, for example, is all in blue, and it's kind of for a reason, because blue makes us trust things more. So banks, you'll notice, have a lot of blue websites as well. Now, that being said, does it necessarily mean you should trust the website? Maybe, maybe not. If you're an entrepreneur, this is something you can consider when building your website. If you're a consumer, you should think about how this impacts you.
I've noticed in the political campaigns, normally a candidate will use red, white, and blue or some variation on that, but once in a while you'll see somebody using green. And look back through campaign history. Nobody with a green sign wins. Like Jimmy Carter, even Ted Kennedy. Green never wins in politics.
Huh. Yeah, so blue might be the way to go, right? To earn people's trust. Although green, yeah, maybe you're thinking of the Green Party or anything like that, but I don't know that they use it as much anyway. Green tends to have this connotation of earth and being environmentally sustainable or something being fresh. Might not necessarily work in politics. What's interesting too is that men and women prefer different colors and are more likely to buy depending on the color of a website, right? Based on their gender. So women love colors like gray, women don't like colors like gray, orange, and brown, but they love colors like blue, purple, and green. Men like blue, green, and black. What are your favorite colors?
I'm a blue and black guy all the way around. And partially that's just functionality, because then I'm a lazy dude and you just grab anything and it's going to match. Blue and black, and you can't go wrong. So you put on some red shoes and then you're screwed. Yeah. But you look good in the brown dress.
Oh, thank you. Although women in general don't like earthy tones, and they're less likely to buy things if it's in earthy tones. But I think really what was fascinating to me about this study is how much of an impact color has on us when we're purchasing a product where color might not necessarily be related to it at all, right? You think if I'm buying a camera, a video camera or photo camera, whatever, color doesn't really matter in terms of the shell, but I've even considered, I just bought a camera myself and I was like, oh, I don't want the purple one. I'm gonna grab the nice, sleek, black one.
Sure, and when it comes to, say, an iPhone case or something, you know, do I want a yellow one or a pink one? No, that's gonna look weird. When I picked out the cover for my iPad, I wanted a specific one, but all they had was red. I didn't want red. I wanted black, So why this why do I care about what color it is? Because it attaches itself to some sort of imaging.
Yeah, imaging, and also you can even see this with diets. If you use a blue plate, for example, as opposed to a white plate, you're less likely to consume food. If you have the blue plate, we tend to associate blue foods kind of as poisonous. We don't have normal natural blue foods except for blueberries and stuff.
But those are
right?
actually purple.
Purplish, right.
Yeah.
So we have all these associations, and I think that we should take a step back and think of the way color impacts us and how it impacts our buying behavior, our diet, or anything like that. Let us know what is your favorite color if you've ever purchased something and thought, oh man, why did I buy this? Maybe it was just that it was in your favorite color, you associated it with something. And remember to subscribe to the Lip TV.
As an example, look at this slide. What do you see first? Do you see the logo first, or do you see the colors? What's wrong with this? Well, to me, it seems like green Dunkin' Donuts isn't very appetizing. Font is another very important brand identifier because we as human beings connect symbols to meaning. Font is another brand identifier that connects to us on a very deep human level. A font is a set of printable or displayable text characters in a specific style and size. The type design for a set of fonts is the typeface, and the variations of this design form the typeface family. For example, Arial is a typeface family. Arial Italic is a typeface, and Arial Italic 10-point is a font. Look at this slide. These fonts are recognizable. They're part of the brand identifier, and because they are symbols, because words are symbols that signify something else, these specific fonts help signify that specific brand to us, the consumer.
Typography. Sometimes I think typography must be a rude word when I use it outside my circle of designer friends. If I say it at a party, sometimes people ask me what I do for a living. I gradually see their feet start to turn in a different direction. And then before you know it, they've gone, and I'm standing there. But yet, we're all type consumers. Typefaces, fonts play a vital role in our everyday lives. They help us to navigate. They help us to make choices. They help us to shop. They keep us safe. And sometimes, they even play a game of sleight of hand. It's hugely important, as the world evolves, that all of those involved in the future of communication and technology understand the power of type. I first fell in love with type in the 1970s. I remember the 70s in faded Polaroid colours and always hot like that summer of '76. I'm in the newsagents on the corner of my street, and it smells of a mixture of fresh tobacco, which is a kind of deep, woody, almost mahogany-like smell, and it's mingled with the sweetness of the blossom coming in from outside. My mum's up at the counter buying a packet of cigarettes and a newspaper, and I'm vaguely aware that the radio's not quite tuned in. But I'm over here at the sweet counter, where words are popping and fizzing with excitement, all shouting out their different stories. You've got the curly-whirly, curvy letters, all shouting out and promising this tongue twister of caramel sweet. You've got the cowboy letters on the golden nuggets bag, swaggering straight out of the Wild West. And you've got the huge moon-shaped type on the space dust, promising that when you eat it, it's going to pack a real noisy space-age punch. To the child me, fonts are like multi-sensory imagination grenades. They're all shouting out the stories of what I'm going to find inside the packaging. Fonts turn words into stories. Years later, I entered the world of work, and I become a typography professional, a graphic designer in a big corporate PR company in London. I arrive all bright-eyed and full of enthusiasm, so excited that I've left my hometown and I've moved to the big city and I've made it. But I very quickly discover that it's like going from baking novelty birthday cakes for friends to being thrown in at the deep end of working in a professional kitchen. I discover that being a graphic designer is about understanding what a client really means, not what they say. And I learn the tricks and the tools that I need to use to communicate their message in the most effective way. And this is where I really learn about the power of type. That a font can completely transform the meaning of a word. It can give it a backstory, it can give it a personality, and it can turn it into something that can influence. I learned that I can take something cheap and mass-produced, and I can make it look handmade, sizzling fresh, and much more expensive, even if it's not. And this is a very well-used advertising technique. I learned that I can take something temporary, and I can give it longevity and gravitas. And I learned that I can use a typeface to give a huge impersonal corporate organisation a voice that says, "We're friendly, we really care about you." Or, "We're exclusive and luxurious." Or, "Trust us, we've been established forever." Typography is storytelling. Fonts turn words into stories. And in the corporate world, these are powerful brand stories. As the years go on, there's this little voice that starts to get louder and louder inside me. And I find myself starting to question how I feel about my role in this industry. I start to ask questions about how I feel about telling stories, about telling typographic fibs. And I find myself joking with my colleagues about maybe we should be using fonts that reveal the truth, not typefaces that create myths. Today is the day of reckoning. I've been asked to work on a tobacco account. And no matter how hard I try to reconcile this in my mind, however hard I try to convince myself this doesn't really matter, this is only type, people have free will at the end of the day, the more this crystallizes to me exactly how I feel about my role in this industry. Today I know that I don't want to tell a story about cigarettes that makes them appealing to a new generation of nicotine addicts. I don't want to tell a story about cigarettes that makes them attractive, cool, sexy, or anything that hides the truth of what they really are. I'm told that if I don't want to work on this account, I'm to question my future at this company. And it actually turns out to be an easy choice to make, to walk away and leave this job. Fonts turn words into stories with influence. And as the graphic designer, I've started to feel the responsibility of my role as the storyteller. So, how do fonts influence us without us really knowing about it? They work a little bit like clothes. When we see them, they make a first impression. When somebody's talking to you, you apparently take less than 10% of the meaning from what they say from the words they're actually saying. The rest of it comes from their tone of voice, from their body language, and from the clothes they wear. The clothes a person wears tells the world who they are. It tells the world who they want to be that day. We've all made assumptions about each other from the first impressions from the clothes that they're wearing, whether you've been aware of this or not. These words are dressed in Dido. This is a typeface, a type style that came out of a bit of healthy competition between a Parisian and an Italian printer at the turn of the 19th century. We've seen these used on fashion magazines like Vogue and Harper's Bazaar over the years, and as a result we've come to associate them with style, femininity, and fashion. So this is like the little black dress, the LBD of the type world. These words are in Esthétique, which is inspired by the highly ornate lettering of the Victorian era, complete with all its sign painter flourishes. You'll be expecting what you'll read here to be entertaining and theatrical. By contrast, this is the interview suit of the type world. This is Times New Roman, which was created, commissioned by the Times newspaper in 1931, after it had received criticisms for being typographically antiquated. You would use Times New Roman when you want to come across as being serious and credible. You would wear Times New Roman when you want people to really know that you know what you're talking about. But of course, just because I'm talking typography, there's no need for me to be completely serious and Times New Roman about this. The stories that fonts tell can be serious and credible, but they can also be fun and entertaining, just like those sweets in that sweet shop when I was a child. Typefaces communicate with our subconscious. They leave our conscious brain to read what the words are actually saying. And that's why we often think that we're not really paying attention to fonts. We are, it's just we're not paying attention to them consciously. But they're still getting in there and they're still talking to us. They communicate with our subconscious in two different ways. The first is to tap into information that's been hardwired into our DNA for protection and for survival. We know instinctively, when we look at something round and red, that it's likely to be ripe and sweet and nutritious and good to eat. But we also know that if we look at something jagged, it looks angry, it looks dangerous, and it's likely to taste sour or to taste bitter. We can play with this. We can use this to alter your experiences. At a recent event, I got the 100 members of the audience to eat 2 identical jelly beans. They ate the first jelly bean while they were looking at a round-shaped typeface, and they ate the second jelly bean while they were looking at jagged, angular-shaped letters. The audience members rated the jelly bean eaten to the round-shaped typeface as tasting 17% sweeter, and they rated the identical jelly bean eaten to the jagged-shaped typeface as tasting 11% sourer. So the fonts actually altered how the sweets tasted. And I find I get the same results with crisps. I can make them taste saltier and crunchier depending on the typeface. How would it be if we could use this for good? To ramp up the salt and the sugar in our imaginations like a placebo via the fonts on the packaging, and to reduce the amounts in the actual food, but to do this without altering our perception of what the food tastes like. This is all being researched by scientists in Oxford at the moment, and they are obviously researching it under much more stringent and scientific conditions than my slightly theatrical demonstrations. But the results all bear each other out, that this works. The other way that typefaces communicate with your subconscious is to reference the complex library of associations that you've been building up in your brains all of your lives. You build these up every time you see a font from the context that you see it used in. So some of these are pretty universal. People around the world will recognize them. Others will be down to your own very, very personal and unique experiences. Some of these remain constant, unaltered over time, and others will change with the flick of an event that adds to their history and creates a whole new set of associations. And some of these are so famous that I don't actually need to show them to you. I'm going to get you to create these in your imaginations. So if you imagine the curved red ribbon-like letters of the Coca-Cola logo, these tell a story of 1950s America, of long, hot summer days, James Dean, and movies like Grease. When you look at these, you know that they're probably going to taste sweet, even if you've never actually tasted Coke before. You also know if a film or a book is going to be a tale of cowboys swaggering out of the dusty leather and whiskey-smelling Wild West. You know this from those condensed letters with the big slabs of serifs to their tops and their bottoms. These were invented in England after the Industrial Revolution, and they were shipped around the world in the 1800s. But we've seen them used in Hollywood movies so many times now that when we see them, we automatically think cowboys. Fonts turn words into stories. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to show you a story in 15 fonts. Long ago, in a galaxy far, far away, Darth Vader was the front man for the evil empire. Darth and his stormtroopers attack the beautiful Princess Leia's ship. 2 droids escape. Down on Tatooine, farm boy Luke sets off on an epic adventure. There's a gunfight in the Mos Eisley Cantina. Luke and the gang escape and they travel via hyperspace. There's a disturbance in the Force. Alderaan is destroyed. Luke and the gang get trapped on the Death Star in a garbage crusher. Darth and Obi-Wan fight. Obi-Wan dies. The rebels blow up the Death Star and they throw a huge party. So next time I'm at a party, if it's you I get talking to and I say the word typography, will you make your excuses and politely walk away? Or will you join me in my world of fonts and stories? Thank you.
The final brand identifier that we're going to talk about is voice. Voice is the spoken or written word that the brand uses to identify themselves. There are 12 characteristics that we can look at when we're talking about voice, and the way it's employed by a brand. So when we're talking about the voice components, we're talking about word length, like how long are the words? Are they using words like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious or words like fast? The sentence length, are the sentences short sentences or sentences that are longer that require commas and semicolons? The tempo, how does the message sound when it is read aloud? Does it take a lot of time? Or is the message pretty clear and fast and it doesn't take a lot of time? That's the tempo of the voice component. Pronouns, what kind of pronouns do they use? Are they getting to the point? How concise are they? Do they get to the point fast, or they take a lot of time to explain something? Jargon or industry commonalities, words that are only in those industries. Those are they using buzzwords, words that are around just now, that have just come out, that are kind of trendy? For instance, the word authentic. The word authentic wasn't used until the 2000s to describe someone who's real or consistent. Does the brand use cliches? Overused terminology? Does the brand use contractions? In other words, do they use don't, can't, won't instead of do not, cannot, and will not? Do they use colloquialisms? So slang or language used by one specific group. Do they use obscure words like exceedingly or magnificent? And do they make purposeful mistakes like grammatical errors or use easily confused words? These 12 guidelines are all the voice components that a brand can use to separate the way they talk and the way their text is written from other brands. All these brand identifiers would be in the brand style guide for the brand, which is basically just a set of standards for writing and designing brand communication. So they're guidelines that define the voice, color, font, as well as the archetype, brand statement, logo, or any other graphic or imagery. There's something that can be used to consistently communicate the brand to an audience. And that's really what we're talking about. The thing that separates brands that are successful from brands that aren't, or that struggle, frankly, is brand consistency. Do they always behave the way that they put out in their brand style guide? Do we always see the same colors? Are there times whenever they go against brand, that they change brand? For instance, there's the case of Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola came out with something called New Coke. But the problem was that Coca-Cola's brand was, this is the real thing. It was their brand from the 70s, the real thing. Then they came out with New Coke. Well, which is it? How can it be the real thing if it's New Coke? So the brand struggled, and people demanded to have the old formula back. And so what Coca-Cola had to do was they had to release Coca-Cola Classic, which was the original formula. And once Coca-Cola Classic had a strong foothold, they slowly pulled New Coke out of the market. And this speaks to brand perception. When you're consistent, when your colors and font type and voice all intersect with your archetype and your brand statement, then you're perceived to be a consistent, strong brand. It's what audiences and consumers look for whenever they're trying to decide what brand they're going to choose over another one. Just as a brief case study, let's look at the Home Depot. So the Home Depot is a hardware store. Their brand statement is the hardware department store for do-it-yourselfers. So their tagline is, you can do it, we can help. So that Home Depot logo, color, font, it all speaks to the do-it-yourself person. So how well do the logo, voice, and color of your brand work to support the brand story? How well do they engage the customer and establish brand identity? How do they measure up against other brands of the same category? So let's think about that for a second. How consistent is Home Depot in their brand identifiers? And how do they compare with other home improvement stores? Well, let's look at their signage. Notice their signage has that same orange color, and all the typography on it, the font, is that same do-it-yourself stencil-like color. And it's also all slightly skewed on the angle the same way the Home Depot logo is. And then if you look at branded merchandise, because men are their major clientele, their merchandise like this man card is very much branded with Home Depot. And then finally the employees. All the employees have aprons on, and all the aprons are do-it-yourself aprons. In other words, they have a space where the employee writes their name in with a Sharpie. They literally do it themselves. So it's a do-it-yourself store where employees are there to help you, but it's you doing the work, pulling the merchandise down yourself. And then outside of their store, they have things like race cars. And if you look at this race car, it is orange. And if you ever see it go around the track, you see it. It is an orange streak. But notice even on the hood of the car, the Home Depot logo, again, is still skewed the same way. It's consistent. It doesn't change. Again, why does all this matter? Because it connects to the customer. The brand style guide, consistent messaging, expectations are met, makes brand loyalty, establishes reputation. It ultimately is the brand story. And it's what makes people have brand loyalty. The reason why people go to McDonald's over Burger King, or drink Pepsi over Coke, or I'm a Mac and I'm a PC. It's based on that brand loyalty and how people connect to the story of the brand. Are they more like an Apple or more like a Mac because of the archetype of creator versus ruler? Brand identifiers are all the parts that meet together to help you understand the brand and who they are as a brand.